Chloe should have walked away that night, but instead, one reckless decision changed everything. 9 months later, she's carrying twins, and the father? A millionaire who thought he couldn't have kids. But how did it happen? Let's rewind to that night. Chloe, a woman who always played it safe, was now caught in a web of secrets. She wasn't just dealing with an unexpected pregnancy. She was carrying twins, and the man who fathered them had been told he was infertile. But let me back up to the moment everything changed. It was a cold, stormy night in New York City. The kind of night where the rain drummed relentlessly against windows, and the city lights flickered like dying stars in the distance. Chloe was alone in her apartment, the weight of her secret pressing down on her shoulders. Sitting there, phone in hand, Chloe stared at the test results, her heart hammering in her chest. Twins. And they were his. She never imagined this would happen, especially not with him. She was the woman who always followed the rules, always made the responsible choice. But that night, she threw all caution aside. And then, he walked back into her life. Nathaniel Westbrook, the man who could shatter everything. Before we go any further, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss the shocking twists ahead. Drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. And what would you do if you were Chloe? Keep the secret or confront him. Let's dive in. Chloe's fingers trembled as she stared at the 2 lines on the test. Twins. The word hit her like a physical blow. She had taken the test twice, just to be sure. But now, as the harsh fluorescent light of her bathroom flickered above, she couldn't make sense of it. It felt like a nightmare she couldn't wake up from. The sound of rain tapping against her window was the only thing that cut through the silence. The city outside was a blur of lights, fading into the dark sky. But here, in her small apartment, Chloe felt the weight of the world pressing down on her chest. She had always been the responsible one, the kind of woman who kept everything in order, every detail planned out, every choice calculated. But that night, everything had slipped through her fingers. It was supposed to be a distraction, just one night to escape the suffocating demands of her job, her family, and the endless expectations she couldn't outrun. She never planned to cross that line, never meant to let herself go, to give in to a moment of weakness. But she had. And now she was sitting here, alone in the dark, with the truth staring her in the face. Chloe grabbed the edge of the sink, her knuckles white, trying to steady herself. She took a deep breath, as if the air in her lungs could somehow clear her mind. But nothing could. Nathaniel Westbrook, the man who had been a stranger, a man she barely knew. He had been so cold, so distant. The kind of man who wore his pain like armor, rich, detached, too proud to admit vulnerability. Yet for one night, they had shared something raw, something that neither of them had expected. A single night, and here she was, with 2 children growing inside her. She wasn't sure what hurt more, the shock of the pregnancy, or the fact that she was now connected to him, irrevocably. He was supposed to be infertile. The rumors were as clear as the paperwork he'd signed, but that didn't explain what had happened. What had really happened that night. Her phone buzzed on the counter, breaking her from her thoughts. She glanced at the screen. It was a message from her sister, checking in about dinner plans for the weekend. Chloe typed a quick reply, her fingers moving mechanically, her thoughts miles away. She was about to set the phone down when the notification from the clinic flashed on the screen. Your test results are in. Chloe's heart skipped a beat. With shaking hands, she clicked the message. Results. Confirmed pregnancy. Twin pregnancy. Her stomach turned. Her hands went numb. There it was, right in front of her. The undeniable truth. She could feel her breath quickening, as if the air was being sucked out of the room. But she had to face it. There was no turning back now. What would she do? She couldn't hide from this, couldn't pretend like it wasn't happening. The weight of it all felt like it was crushing her chest. Would she tell Nathaniel? How could she? He had his own life, his own problems. What if he didn't even want to know? Chloe let out a shaky breath, her body trembling. The question lingered in the air. Was she ready to face the consequences of one reckless night? Before she could answer that question, the doorbell rang, and she knew deep down that the person on the other side would change everything. The doorbell rang again, louder this time. Chloe's heart skipped in her chest. Who could it be at this hour? She hadn't expected anyone. She stood frozen, her mind racing, but her body was paralyzed. She glanced at the clock. 11:15 p.m. Only one person would be knocking at her door this late. Nathaniel. Her hands shook as she made her way to the door, each step heavy with dread. She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. Was she ready for this? For whatever he had to say? When she opened the door, Nathaniel stood there, looking every bit the part of the stoic millionaire he was. Tailored suit, his usually composed expression hiding something more complicated beneath. His eyes flickered to hers for a split second, before he stepped inside without waiting for an invitation. "I didn't expect you," Chloe managed, her voice barely above a whisper. She wished she sounded more confident than she felt. Nathaniel didn't respond right away. Instead, he took in the room, his gaze sharp but detached. He stepped inside and closed the door behind him, not bothering with any pleasantries. He wasn't here for small talk, not tonight. "You're not going to make this easy, are you?" he said, his voice low, tired. Chloe wasn't sure what he meant. He could be referring to a dozen things. To the lies, to the shared night they both regretted, or maybe to something darker that neither of them was ready to face. She didn't speak at first. What could she say? She had too many questions, but none that felt safe to ask. The silence stretched out, thick and awkward. Nathaniel's presence in her apartment felt almost suffocating. He never seemed to show up without some kind of agenda, his walls as high as ever, but she knew that behind them, something had shifted. He was here because he had no choice. "Chloe," he said, the weight of her name rolling off his tongue, heavy with uncertainty. What the hell happened that night? The question felt like a punch in the gut. She had expected something like this, but it still left her reeling. Nathaniel had made it clear in every way that night was a mistake. He had been distant, guarded, barely letting her in. But now, he was standing there, vulnerable in his own way, asking her to explain the very thing that neither of them had an answer for. "That's what I was trying to figure out too," she replied, her voice shaking as she struggled to keep her composure. "How could it happen? You're infertile," he finished for her. His eyes narrowed slightly. "I know." Chloe closed her eyes, the weight of it all almost too much to bear. "The test came back positive, with twins," she whispered, unable to look him in the eye. Saying it aloud made it too real. And the reality was something she couldn't escape. There was a long pause before Nathaniel took a step closer to her. His usual coldness was replaced by something more raw, more human. The stoic businessman was gone, and in his place stood a man who didn't know what to do with the situation in front of him. "You're sure?" His voice was softer now, as if asking for the truth he feared to hear. Chloe nodded, though the words felt impossible. She couldn't deny it any longer. It was as real as the shock on Nathaniel's face. The truth was staring them both down, but it didn't make sense. There was no logical explanation. Nathaniel was supposed to be infertile. How could he be the father? "How?" she finally asked, her voice barely a whisper. Nathaniel ran a hand through his dark hair, frustration building in the lines of his face. "I don't know, but if the test says twins, it has to be me. There's no one else." Chloe felt the weight of his words settle heavily in the room. The tension between them thickened, each second dragging by like an eternity. This wasn't just a conversation about an unexpected pregnancy. It was about the unraveling of everything they thought they knew about each other. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice cracking, the guilt heavy in her chest. "I never meant for this to happen. But I don't know what you want from me, Nathaniel. This isn't just about us anymore. It's about something we can't control." He was silent for a moment, as if he hadn't heard her, his eyes searching hers for an answer that neither of them had. "You're right," he finally said. "We can't control it, but we have to figure this out. Together." Chloe's breath caught in her throat. There was something in his eyes now, a vulnerability she hadn't expected. He was making an offer, a chance to face this head-on, to deal with the consequences of their actions. But could they really do this together? Could she trust him? The answer came too slowly. "I don't know if I can," she admitted. "I've spent my whole life being careful, protecting myself. But now everything is out of my hands." Nathaniel stepped closer again, his voice soft but resolute. "We don't have to figure everything out tonight, but we do need to figure out what happens next." Chloe closed her eyes, her thoughts a whirlwind of confusion, guilt, and fear. She had never imagined her life could turn upside down so quickly. The pregnancy wasn't just a complication. It was a declaration of everything she didn't know about herself, about Nathaniel. And now, as their worlds collided, the question wasn't just about whether she could trust him. It was whether they could trust each other. The next step felt like the hardest one to take. But Chloe knew she had no choice. It wasn't just about the twins anymore. It was about them, and what this would mean for both their futures. Before either of them could speak again, the phone rang. Chloe glanced at it, her stomach dropping. The caller ID read, "Doctor, urgent." The phone rang again, its shrill sound breaking the tense silence between them. Chloe stared at the screen, her heart pounding. She didn't want to pick it up, didn't want to hear what the doctor might say, but she knew she had no choice. The truth was already spiraling out of control, and whatever came next would only make things more complicated. Nathaniel watched her, his eyes searching for something in her expression, something he couldn't quite decipher. Chloe's fingers hovered over the phone for a moment before she answered, the tension in the room so thick it almost suffocated her. "Hello?" Her voice was unsteady, betraying the nerves she couldn't suppress. The doctor's voice was calm but urgent. "Ms. Carson, we've received your test results, and I need you to come in immediately. It's important we discuss your pregnancy." Chloe's stomach tightened. The way the doctor spoke, there was something in his tone that didn't sit right with her. She glanced at Nathaniel, who had now moved closer, his presence looming behind her. "Is everything okay?" Nathaniel asked. His voice unusually soft. It was a rare vulnerability, the kind she hadn't expected from him. Chloe didn't answer right away. Her mind raced as the doctor's words echoed in her head. There was more to this, something they weren't telling her. She had to know what was going on. But did she want Nathaniel to know? Did she want him to be this close to her life, to all the mess that was unraveling? "Chloe?" Nathaniel's voice broke through her thoughts. She looked up at him, meeting his gaze. There was no avoiding this anymore. No more hiding. She had to face it, and she had to face him. "I'm going to the clinic," she said quietly, turning away from him and pacing across the room. "I need to know what's happening with the pregnancy. The tests. They don't add up." Nathaniel didn't move, but she could feel his eyes on her, watching her every step. She swallowed hard. "Come with me," she said, surprising herself with the request. She had never expected to invite him into something so personal, but there was no one else she could rely on right now, not with everything spiraling so fast. He didn't hesitate. Of course. The two of them drove in silence to the clinic, the tension between them thickening with every mile. The city outside was a blur of lights and shadows, but inside the car, it was as if time had stopped. Chloe's thoughts raced, a mix of fear and confusion that gnawed at her insides. What was the doctor going to say? Was there a bigger problem than just the pregnancy? She had so many questions, but the answers seemed further and further out of reach. When they arrived at the clinic, Chloe's legs felt like jelly as she walked into the sterile waiting room. The sharp, clinical smell of antiseptic made her stomach turn. She hated places like this. But she had no choice. Nathaniel stayed close behind her, his presence a silent support. His usual arrogance had faded, replaced by something softer, more concerned. It was unsettling. She wasn't sure if she was relieved or terrified that he was here with her. "Ms. Carson?" A nurse called her name, pulling her from her thoughts. Chloe stood up, her knees weak, and followed the nurse into the examination room. Nathaniel remained in the waiting room, his eyes locked on her as she disappeared behind the door. Inside, the doctor was waiting, his expression grave. He didn't greet her with his usual professionalism. There was no warm handshake, no polite small talk. He simply gestured to the chair. "Sit down, Ms. Carson." We need to talk about your results, the doctor said, his voice low. Chloe felt her pulse quicken as she sat down, her hands gripping the armrests. She didn't want to hear it. She didn't want to know what was coming. "Doctor, what's going on?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. The doctor hesitated for a moment, glancing at the chart in front of him before meeting her eyes. "Ms. Carson, there seems to be a complication with the pregnancy. The tests indicate that it's not just a normal twin pregnancy." Chloe felt a lump form in her throat. "What do you mean?" "There are anomalies," he continued. "It's not just the fact that you're pregnant with twins. There are genetic markers that shouldn't be present. They don't match up with either you or the father." Chloe's breath caught in her throat. She felt as if the ground had just been pulled out from under her. "You're telling me that something's wrong with the babies?" she choked out. The doctor nodded slowly. "We need to conduct further tests, but it's possible there's a medical condition we're not aware of yet. It's too early to say for sure, but I need you to come back for more tests immediately." Chloe's head spun. She couldn't process it. Everything was spiraling out of control. First, the pregnancy, then the shocking revelation about Nathaniel, and now this? But the doctor's words didn't make sense. How could the baby's genetic markers be wrong? She was only now starting to understand how deep the mystery ran, and she didn't know how much more she could take. "I'll schedule the test for tomorrow," the doctor added, standing up and reaching for the door. "Don't delay this, Ms. Carson. The sooner we know, the better." Chloe felt numb. As she stood up to leave, she had no idea what kind of future was waiting for her, and no idea if Nathaniel would be part of it. As Chloe walked back into the waiting room, she caught sight of Nathaniel standing by the window, his face unreadable. But as he turned to look at her, she saw the concern in his eyes. And for the first time since they'd met, she wondered if he was truly ready for the storm that was coming. "Are you okay?" Nathaniel asked, his voice soft but filled with something that sounded like genuine care. Chloe nodded, but deep down she wasn't sure if she was okay, or if she ever would be again. Chloe stepped out of the clinic's cold, sterile building and into the biting New York night. The weight of what the doctor had said hung heavy in the air, suffocating her. Genetic anomalies. Her head was still spinning, trying to make sense of the doctor's words, but nothing made sense anymore. How could she have gone from a one-night mistake to twins with unknown genetic complications? Nathaniel was waiting for her by the car, his broad frame leaning against the sleek black sedan. His usual cool composure had cracked, and in its place was something softer, almost uncertain. Chloe caught the look in his eyes as she approached. His gaze was focused on her, but it wasn't just concern. It was expectation. The kind of look that made her feel like she was supposed to have all the answers. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice low, careful. She wanted to say yes, wanted to tell him she had everything under control, but the lie wouldn't come out. Instead, she nodded slowly, avoiding his eyes as she slipped into the passenger seat. The weight of her secret felt unbearable now. It wasn't just the pregnancy, it was everything that had happened since. Nathaniel's infertility, the unspoken tension between them, and now the news from the doctor that made everything even more complicated. Nathaniel climbed into the driver's seat without another word. The car was quiet, save for the hum of the engine, but Chloe could feel the questions building between them. She knew he was waiting for her to say something, but she didn't know where to start. "Chloe," Nathaniel's voice broke the silence. "What did the doctor say?" She turned toward him, finally meeting his gaze. His face was full of questions, but there was something else there too, a deeper level of concern she hadn't expected. He wasn't just curious. He was invested. The realization hit her like a punch to the gut. "It's complicated," she said, her voice trembling despite her best effort to sound calm. "The doctor said there are complications with the pregnancy. Genetic anomalies. They don't match up with either of us. They're not even sure if it's something that can be fixed." Nathaniel's hand tightened on the steering wheel, his knuckles going white. "Anomalies?" he repeated. His eyes were fixed on the road, but she could see the tension in his jaw, the way his body stiffened with each word. "Yes, I don't know what that means yet," she said, her words trailing off. She wasn't ready to face the weight of her own fears, let alone explain them to him. They drove in silence for a few minutes, the city lights flashing by in a blur. Chloe couldn't stop replaying the conversation with the doctor in her head. The uncertainty, the fear of what might come next. It was all too much. She had been trying so hard to keep it together, but now she didn't know how much longer she could. Finally, Nathaniel spoke again, his voice quieter this time. "Chloe, I don't know what this means for us, but I want you to know something." He glanced over at her, his eyes intense. "I'm not going anywhere. You're not alone in this." Her heart skipped a beat at his words. For a moment, she almost believed him. Almost. But then the doubt crept in. Was he really saying that because he cared about her? Or because he felt responsible for something that wasn't even his fault? "I'm not asking you to be," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "I just don't know what's going to happen next. I don't know if I can handle it. And I don't know if I can ask you to stay if this is going to keep getting harder." Nathaniel's eyes softened as he reached for her hand, the warmth of his touch sending a jolt through her. "You don't have to ask. I'm staying. Whether you want me here or not, Chloe. I'm in this with you." The sincerity in his voice was unmistakable, and for a brief moment, Chloe let herself believe it. But there was still so much she didn't know, so much she couldn't figure out on her own, and the uncertainty of it all weighed her down. When they arrived at her apartment, Chloe felt the familiar unease settle over her. She didn't want to be alone tonight. She didn't want to face this on her own. But the truth was, she didn't want Nathaniel's help either. Not because she didn't need it, but because asking for it meant confronting a future she wasn't ready to face. As she stepped out of the car, Nathaniel followed her up the stairs to her door. She hesitated for a moment before unlocking it, the cold metal of the key feeling like it weighed a ton in her hand. "I'm going to be here," Nathaniel said again, his voice low but steady, as if offering her one last lifeline. "You don't have to do this alone." Chloe didn't know how to respond. She wanted to say something that would make everything feel better, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, she simply nodded and stepped inside. Nathaniel didn't push, didn't try to come in. He just stood there, waiting for her to make the next move. The door closed behind her with a soft click. She leaned against it for a moment, letting out a long, shaky breath. Everything had changed in the last few days, and she wasn't sure she could keep up with the pace of it all. And then, her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, and her stomach dropped. It was a message from her sister. "I heard about the test results. I don't know what you're going through right now, but I want you to know I'm here for you. Call me when you're ready." Chloe closed her eyes, the weight of the message pressing down on her chest. The secret was slipping away faster than she could control. What if Nathaniel wasn't the only one who'd find out? What if this was all going to blow up in her face? The doorbell rang again, and Chloe felt her heart skip a beat. She wasn't ready for this. Not yet. But deep down, she knew there was no avoiding it. She opened the door. It wasn't Nathaniel. Standing before her was a man she didn't expect to see tonight, the last person she wanted to see right now. Chloe's breath caught in her throat when she opened the door. Standing in front of her, drenched from the rain, was James Westbrook, Nathaniel's older brother. The last person she expected, and certainly the last person she wanted to see right now. She didn't even know how to react. Her heart raced as she took in his disheveled appearance, soaked hair, eyes wide with a mix of determination and something darker. The Westbrook family was known for their power and control, but James always seemed to be the shadow, the quiet one who lived under Nathaniel's towering presence. "Chloe," James said, his voice strained but steady. "We need to talk." Chloe instinctively stepped back, her mind still reeling from everything she had learned at the clinic. "I'm not ready for this," she thought. But before she could shut the door, James pushed his way inside, uninvited. "Don't shut me out," he continued, his tone more forceful than she had ever heard. "You need to hear what I have to say." She froze as he walked past her into the hallway, his presence filling the small apartment in an instant. She couldn't avoid him. Not now. "How did you find me?" Chloe finally managed to ask, her voice barely above a whisper, but the question lingered in the air like an accusation. James looked at her, his face hardening. "You're not the only one trying to hide things. Nathaniel's been telling me things, and I can't let you destroy everything he's worked for." "Destroy?" Chloe repeated, confused and angry at the same time. "I'm not trying to destroy anything. I'm just trying to figure out what's going on. What Nathaniel's family has put me through, what you have put me through, it's too much." James didn't flinch. He crossed his arms, taking a step closer to her. "You think you're the only one stuck in a situation you didn't choose? You're not. We all are." His words were clipped, as if each one came with a purpose, as if he had been rehearsing this moment for a long time. Chloe shook her head, her emotions starting to boil over. "This is about Nathaniel and me, not you or your family. I don't want any part of it anymore." James let out a short, humorless laugh. "You don't get to walk away, Chloe. You never really had a choice. The Westbrook family doesn't let people go once they've been caught in their game." His words struck a chord deep inside her, leaving a cold knot in her stomach. Caught in their game. That's exactly how she felt. But it wasn't just the family that had her trapped. It was Nathaniel, too. She couldn't stop thinking about how everything had unfolded between them, how her feelings for him had grown despite the mess they were both in. Chloe's voice cracked as she tried to hold on to whatever control she had left. "What do you want from me, James?" James took a step closer, his eyes locking onto hers with a look that was almost predatory. "I want you to stay away from Nathaniel. For good. He doesn't need this kind of distraction in his life, especially not now." Chloe recoiled, the words hitting her like a slap. "Distraction?" she echoed, her voice shaking with a mixture of disbelief and anger. "I'm not a distraction, James. I'm carrying his children. Twins." James's expression faltered for a brief moment, a flash of something unreadable in his eyes, but it quickly turned to stone again. "And you think that matters to Nathaniel?" he asked, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "You don't know what you're dealing with. Nathaniel's life is already planned out. This is just a bump in the road for him." Chloe clenched her fists, feeling her emotions surge to the surface. "Don't you dare tell me what Nathaniel wants. You don't know him, James. You don't know what we're going through." "Believe me," James said, his voice hardening. "I know more than you think." There was a heavy silence between them, the tension so thick it felt suffocating. Chloe could feel her heart pounding in her chest as she tried to hold herself together, to maintain some semblance of control. But James was right about one thing. She was already trapped. Nathaniel's family had woven their way into her life in ways she couldn't have predicted. "You're not going to win this," James added, his tone quiet but final. "Nathaniel has bigger things to worry about than whatever this is between you two. And if you think this baby, these babies, are going to change that, you're wrong." Chloe felt a chill run down her spine as his words sank in. Bigger things. Nathaniel had always seemed to put family and business above everything else. Could she really compete with that? But as she looked at James, standing there with his smug, cold expression, Chloe knew one thing for sure. She wouldn't let him, or anyone, tell her what to do. Not now. "You think you can control everything?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper but filled with a quiet fury. "You think you can threaten me into walking away from Nathaniel? From my own future? You're wrong." James took a step back, his eyes narrowing. For a moment, Chloe thought he might say something else, something that would push her further over the edge. But instead, he just smirked. "We'll see," he said. "We'll see how long you can hold on to this illusion of control. But remember, you're not the only one who's been played." With that, he turned and walked toward the door. Chloe didn't stop him. She didn't try to stop him. She just stood there, rooted to the spot, as he left her apartment with a cold finality. And as the door clicked shut behind him, Chloe was left standing in the quiet, the weight of his words sinking in. She had no idea what was coming next. But one thing was certain. Her life had just become more complicated than ever, and Nathaniel, the man she had tried to protect, might not even be the one who could save her. As she stood in the empty hallway, the weight of the conversation still pressing down on her, Chloe's phone buzzed again. Her heart skipped a beat as she glanced at the screen. It was from Nathaniel. "We need to talk." Chloe's hand trembled as she stared at Nathaniel's message. "We need to talk." 3 simple words, but they sent a shiver down her spine. Everything felt like it was spiraling out of control, and the last thing she wanted was another conversation that would only make things worse. Her phone buzzed again. Another message from Nathaniel. "Meet me at the usual place, I'm waiting." The usual place was a small cafe tucked away on a quiet street in the city. It was a place where they had met once before, back when their relationship was still something innocent, something that felt like it could go somewhere. But now, everything had changed. The pregnancy, the secrets, the complicated web of Nathaniel's family, they had all turned their lives upside down. Chloe stood frozen for a moment, her eyes flicking between her phone and the empty room around her. The walls seemed to close in on her, the weight of the conversation with James still hanging heavy in the air. She had no idea what Nathaniel would say, what he was thinking. But she knew one thing for sure. She couldn't keep avoiding him. With a deep breath, she grabbed her jacket and headed out the door, her mind racing. She had no idea how this conversation would go, but it was time to face whatever came next. When Chloe arrived at the cafe, she spotted Nathaniel sitting at their usual table, his back to the window, his eyes focused on his phone. He hadn't seen her yet, but she had seen him. He looked tense, his jaw clenched, and the usual confidence he exuded was nowhere to be found. For the first time, Nathaniel looked vulnerable. It was almost like he had aged years in the past few days. Chloe hesitated before walking over. She didn't know what to say, didn't know how to start, but she had to say something. She couldn't keep hiding, and she couldn't keep letting the silence between them grow. She walked up to the table, her footsteps tentative. Nathaniel's eyes flicked up to meet hers, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. The tension between them was palpable, thick enough to feel like it had weight. Finally, Nathaniel broke the silence, his voice low but steady. "Chloe, we need to talk about what's going on." She nodded, slipping into the chair across from him. "I know," she said quietly. "I've been thinking about nothing but that. But I'm not sure where to start." Nathaniel leaned back in his chair, his hands clasped in front of him. "Let's start with the obvious," he said. "The twins. I don't know how this happened. I've been trying to figure it out, but nothing adds up. The doctors told me I was infertile. They gave me those tests, all of them. And yet, here we are." Chloe swallowed, her throat dry. "I don't know how it happened either, but it did. And now we have to deal with it." Nathaniel's eyes darkened, but he didn't look away. "We both have questions, Chloe. I'm not the only one who's confused. But if there's something you're not telling me, I need to know." Chloe felt the sting of his words. If there's something I'm not telling him. How could she explain everything that had been revealed? How could she tell him that she felt like she was in over her head, like everything she thought she knew about her life had been shattered? The truth was, she didn't have all the answers, but Nathaniel didn't deserve to be kept in the dark anymore. "Something happened, Nathaniel," she said, her voice quiet but firm. The genetic test results, they came back strange. There's something about the pregnancy they don't understand. It's not just about us being a couple. Something bigger is going on here." Nathaniel's brow furrowed in confusion. "What do you mean?" Chloe hesitated, her mind racing as she tried to form the words. "The genetic markers. They don't match either of us. They don't match any typical pattern. The doctor said it could be something outside the ordinary." The words hung between them like a heavy fog, and Chloe could see the confusion in Nathaniel's eyes as he processed the information. He was struggling to grasp it, just as she had been. But it was real, and it was terrifying. "Are you telling me?" Nathaniel's voice trailed off, but the fear in his eyes was unmistakable. "Are you telling me this could be something more than just an accident?" Chloe nodded slowly. "I don't know what it is, but the doctor said they need to run more tests, to figure out what's happening. But Nathaniel, the truth is, this pregnancy, these babies, they're not just part of our story anymore. Something is at play here. Something bigger than either of us. The silence between them deepened. Nathaniel's mind seemed to be racing, piecing together everything they had learned. Chloe watched as his expression shifted, the weight of the situation settling over him like a blanket. He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper. "You're telling me that this is not just about us? This is about something else entirely?" Chloe could feel the weight of his words pressing on her chest. "Yes. I don't have the answers. But I promise, I'll do whatever it takes to find out what this really is. Together, we'll figure it out." Nathaniel's expression softened, though his eyes were filled with something she couldn't quite place. Fear, maybe, but also determination. "We don't have a choice, do we?" Chloe shook her head. "No, we don't." Just as the words left her lips, the door to the cafe swung open with a loud chime. A man in a suit stepped inside, his eyes scanning the room. Chloe felt a sudden chill creep up her spine. Something about the man's presence felt wrong. Too familiar, like a shadow looming just out of sight. Nathaniel didn't seem to notice the man at first, but Chloe's pulse quickened as she watched the stranger make his way toward their table. His eyes locked onto hers for a brief moment, recognition flashing in his gaze. Then he walked straight up to them, and with a calm but unsettling smile, he said the words Chloe wasn't ready to hear. "I think we need to talk. About your pregnancy." Chloe's heart skipped a beat as the man approached their table. His confident stride was matched only by the icy look in his eyes, and as he stopped just a few feet away, the world around them seemed to blur into the background. Chloe's pulse quickened, and she instinctively reached for Nathaniel's hand, the only source of comfort she had left. But Nathaniel's hand was cold, his grip tight as he locked eyes with the stranger. The man was tall, with dark, neatly combed hair and a sharp professional appearance that screamed power. He didn't belong in a place like this. His suit was expensive, but it wasn't the clothing that made Chloe's stomach twist. It was the unsettling familiarity in the way he looked at her, the kind of look that made her feel as though he knew something she didn't. "I think we need to talk about your pregnancy," the man repeated, his voice calm but commanding, as if he were already in control of the situation. Nathaniel's brows furrowed. "Who are you?" he demanded, his voice edged with suspicion. The man's lips curled into a small, knowing smile. "I'm someone who knows more about you and your family than you might think, Nathaniel." He glanced at Chloe, his gaze lingering for a moment, calculating. "And I know what's going on with Chloe." Chloe's heart skipped again, but she stayed silent, fear and confusion twisting inside her. What did this man know about her? About Nathaniel? And why the hell was he here? Nathaniel stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "If this is some kind of joke, you're wasting your time," he said, his voice low and threatening. "Now, leave us alone." But the stranger didn't budge. He wasn't afraid of Nathaniel, and it was clear in the way he stood his ground, unshaken. "This isn't a joke," the man said. "I'm here to offer you both a warning about what comes next." He paused for a moment, glancing at Chloe. "You don't want to be involved in this any more than you already are." Chloe opened her mouth to speak, but Nathaniel beat her to it. "What the hell is this about? What do you want with Chloe?" The man sighed, almost as if Nathaniel's frustration was a mere inconvenience to him. He straightened his tie, his eyes flickering back to Chloe. "What I want is simple. I want to make sure both of you understand what's at stake. Nathaniel, your family's interests aren't exactly aligned with your newfound situation here. And Chloe," he turned his full attention to her, his gaze piercing, "you're in deeper than you think. You've been used. And it's not just by Nathaniel. It's by people much more powerful than him." Chloe's head spun. Used? She had been so focused on the pregnancy, on her complicated feelings for Nathaniel, that she never considered what was happening in the shadows, what others might have been doing behind her back. "Who are you?" Nathaniel's voice was colder now, his jaw clenched as he towered over the man. "What do you know about Chloe? About my family?" The stranger took a slow breath, his eyes flicking from Nathaniel to Chloe. "Let's just say, I'm connected to the people who've been watching both of you for quite some time now. Your little family situation isn't a mistake, Chloe. He looked directly at her, his gaze narrowing. You're caught in the middle of something much bigger than you realize. Chloe could feel her chest tightening, her breathing growing shallow. The words felt like a punch to the gut. Bigger than I realize? She wasn't just pregnant with twins. She wasn't just caught up in a mess of infidelity and confusion. She was being watched. "This isn't what I signed up for," she whispered, more to herself than anyone else. Nathaniel's expression darkened. He stepped forward, standing between Chloe and the stranger. "Get to the point. Why are you really here?" The man smiled again, a cold, detached smile. "I'm here because you both need to wake up. Nathaniel, your family didn't just ignore your infertility. They covered it up. They've been manipulating you, and now they're manipulating Chloe. The pregnancy? It's no accident." Chloe's world tilted. Her stomach churned as the pieces of the puzzle began to shift, but nothing seemed to fit. She turned to Nathaniel, who looked as confused as she felt. Was he truly unaware of what the stranger was saying? "You're lying," Nathaniel spat, his voice growing sharper. "No, I'm telling the truth," the man said, his voice as cold as ice. "Your family wanted Chloe's pregnancy to happen. It's not just about you and her anymore. This is bigger than all of us. There are people who want control, and they've already started pulling strings." Chloe recoiled at the mention of control. The words echoed in her mind. Was Nathaniel's family really involved in this? Had they engineered this whole situation? And if they had, why? Nathaniel looked back at her, and for the first time, Chloe saw the doubt in his eyes, the fear that he wasn't in control of his own life. His hands clenched into fists at his sides, his entire body tense with frustration. He turned back to the man, his voice low but filled with barely contained anger. "Who are you working for?" Nathaniel demanded. "What do you want from us?" The man's eyes glinted with something dangerous, something Chloe couldn't quite place. "I don't want anything from you, Nathaniel. But if you're smart, you'll take this seriously. This pregnancy, it's part of something much bigger. And I don't think either of you realize how much trouble you're about to be in." Chloe could feel the walls closing in around her, the air thick with the tension between them. She wanted to scream, to throw him out of the cafe, but she was paralyzed with the weight of his words. The man looked at them both one last time, his gaze lingering on Chloe, before turning toward the door. As he stepped out into the night, he tossed one last warning over his shoulder. "Think about what I've said, and if you don't take this seriously, you'll both regret it." The door slammed shut behind him, leaving Chloe and Nathaniel in stunned silence. Chloe was left standing there, numb, as Nathaniel sank back into his chair. She couldn't shake the feeling that everything had just changed. Something was happening behind the scenes, and no matter how much she wanted to deny it, she knew now that it was much bigger than her and Nathaniel. And they were both in way over their heads. The silence in the cafe felt suffocating after the stranger's departure. Chloe's hands were still trembling, her mind racing, trying to process what had just happened. Every word the man had spoken echoed in her head. Manipulated, controlled. She couldn't tell if it was some elaborate scheme or if they were genuinely in danger, but either way, it felt like her world had just shattered. Nathaniel didn't say a word. He hadn't moved from his seat, his eyes fixed on the table in front of him, as if the answers to everything were hidden there. His jaw was clenched, his hands balled into fists, but there was a quiet, simmering rage behind his eyes. Rage and confusion, both directed inward. Chloe wanted to speak, wanted to break the silence, but she didn't know how to start. What could she say? How do you explain to someone that their family, their entire life, might have been a lie? Finally, Nathaniel spoke, his voice strained. "I should have known. I should have seen this coming." Chloe shook her head, her heart aching for him. "Don't say that. None of us could have known. You didn't do this." "But I'm involved," he said bitterly, lifting his head to meet her eyes. "Whether I want to be or not, I'm part of this mess. And you're right in the middle of it." He exhaled sharply. his frustration evident in every muscle of his body. "I don't know who to trust anymore, Chloe. Not even my own family." Chloe felt a pang of empathy for him, but it was quickly swallowed by her own fear and uncertainty. "We can't change what happened, but we can control what happens next." Nathaniel's gaze softened, but there was something desperate in his eyes. "What if I can't protect you from what's coming? What if everything I've built is just a lie? How do I even begin to make this right?" The weight of his words hit her, and for the first time, she understood the full depth of the mess they were in. It wasn't just about her anymore. Nathaniel was lost in a world of power, deceit, and family expectations he had no control over. And she was right there with him, caught in the undertow. Her mind flickered back to the man's warning, the one who had appeared out of nowhere, dropping truths that were too hard to digest. "Think about what I've said, and if you don't take this seriously, you'll both regret it." Chloe took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. "We have to figure this out, Nathaniel. We need to take control of the situation. Not just for us, but for the babies. I can't do this alone." Nathaniel looked at her, a mixture of gratitude and pain in his eyes. "I know you can't." He paused, his gaze shifting to the door, as though the answers were waiting out there somewhere in the chaos of the night. "But I can't keep running from the truth. My family isn't going to let this go. They've been pulling strings for too long." Chloe's heart tightened. The truth about everything. But how much of it was real, and how much was manipulated? "I'm not asking you to fix everything, Nathaniel," she said quietly, her voice firm. "I'm asking you to fight for what's right. Fight for us. Whatever this is. Whatever we have left." He sat there for a moment, his eyes locked on hers. The weight of her words seemed to settle on him, and for the first time since this entire nightmare had begun, Chloe saw something shift in him. His posture relaxed slightly, the tension in his face easing just a little. "I don't know if I can fix everything," he said quietly, "but I'll do whatever it takes to make sure you and the babies are safe." Chloe's breath hitched. For a brief moment, she let herself believe in the possibility of him, believed that maybe, just maybe, they could survive this together. But even as she allowed herself that fleeting hope, the reality of the situation loomed over her. There was no guarantee that they could escape the forces coming after them. There was no certainty that they wouldn't be crushed beneath the weight of the family's power, or that Nathaniel's past would stop haunting them both. And yet, here they were. Two people who had been thrust into a tangled web of lies, manipulation, and betrayal, but still somehow connected by the fragile thread of a shared, painful truth. Chloe sat back in her chair, looking at Nathaniel with a mixture of determination and fear. "We need a plan," she said, "a real plan. We need to find out what your family is really after and stop it before it destroys everything." Nathaniel nodded, his face hardening. "Agreed. But I need to know that you're with me, all the way. I can't do this if we're not on the same side." Her heart pounded in her chest. This was it, the point of no return. There was no going back now. "I'm with you," she said firmly, her voice steady. "But we need to act fast. They're not going to wait." He stood up, his eyes meeting hers with a renewed sense of purpose. "Then we move now. No more hiding, no more running. We fight." Chloe followed his lead, standing up as well. This wasn't going to be easy, and it wasn't going to be pretty, but it was the only choice they had left. She had already lost too much to back down now. They left the cafe together, stepping out into the night, ready to face whatever came next. Chloe didn't know what would happen, or where this road would lead them, but one thing was certain. They were in this together, and nothing would stop her from protecting the future she now carried inside her. As they walked down the street, an unmarked black car pulled up alongside them. The tinted windows rolled down, revealing a familiar face, someone from Nathaniel's past. Someone who had no business being here, yet there they were. Nathaniel's face went pale as he recognized the man sitting in the back seat. "I think we need to talk," the man said, his voice smooth, almost predatory. Chloe's stomach twisted in knots. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The man in the black car was the last person Chloe ever expected to see again. Ethan Brooks. He had been a shadow in Nathaniel's life, someone who existed on the periphery of the business world, a person whose name was whispered with caution, but rarely discussed openly. Now here he was, seated in the back of a black SUV, looking at Nathaniel and Chloe like they were chess pieces in a game that he was clearly winning. Nathaniel's body went rigid as Ethan leaned forward, the faint smile on his lips sending a cold shiver down Chloe's spine. Nathaniel hadn't moved, hadn't spoken. He just stared at Ethan, his face pale and tight with tension. "Ethan," Nathaniel said, his voice low, the words like stones in the air. "What the hell do you want?" Ethan's smile widened, though it didn't reach his eyes. He looked at Chloe, his gaze calculating, almost too focused. "I think you know exactly what I want, Nathaniel. I'm here to help, but it's going to cost you." Chloe's mind raced, trying to make sense of what was happening. Who was this man? And what did he know about the pregnancy? About her? The more questions she had, the more confused she became. "You've got nothing I want," Nathaniel replied, his jaw clenched. Chloe could feel the tension radiating from him, as though this encounter was more than just a simple business deal. It was personal. "Really?" Ethan said, arching an eyebrow. "What about the truth? Or maybe you've already forgotten about that little deal you made with my family?" Chloe's eyes darted between the two men, trying to make sense of what was being said. The deal? What deal? Nathaniel had never mentioned anything about a deal with Ethan's family. But there was something in Ethan's eyes, a cold, predatory gleam that made Chloe's heart sink. Nathaniel didn't respond immediately, and for a long, tense moment, all Chloe could hear was the hum of the city around them. She could see the storm brewing behind Nathaniel's eyes, the mixture of anger and regret that seemed to cloud his usually composed demeanor. Ethan was right. There was something here, something buried beneath the surface that Nathaniel had been hiding from her. Ethan didn't give Nathaniel the chance to speak. He continued, his voice smooth, like he was savoring the moment. "You know, Nathaniel, I've always admired how good you are at pretending. Pretending you're in control, pretending you've got everything figured out. But deep down, you know the truth, don't you?" Nathaniel's fists tightened at his sides, and Chloe could see the struggle in his eyes. He wasn't just fighting with Ethan. He was fighting with himself. Fighting with whatever deal, whatever secret had been buried in his past. Chloe stepped forward, her voice shaking but firm. "What are you talking about? What does all of this have to do with me?" Ethan turned his gaze toward her, the smile never leaving his face. "Ah, Chloe. The virgin who got pregnant with twins after one night with the supposedly infertile millionaire. Quite the story, isn't it? But you're not as much of an innocent as you think. You've been a part of this since the very beginning." The words hit Chloe like a slap. Her mind whirled, trying to catch up with the implications of what Ethan was saying. A part of this? What was he talking about? The pregnancy? Nathaniel's infertility? Was this all some kind of game to them? Nathaniel's eyes flicked to her, pain and frustration flashing across his face. "Chloe, no. You don't understand." "No, Nathaniel," Chloe interrupted, her voice trembling with anger. "You don't understand. I've been left in the dark this whole time. I've been caught in the middle of a game I didn't sign up for. I don't know what's real anymore. I don't know what you want from me." Ethan chuckled, the sound like nails on a chalkboard. "You're both so naive. You think this is about love or about some accidental pregnancy. This has been in the works for years. Your little romance? Just part of the plan. The Westbrook family is all about control, Chloe. And you, my dear, are just a pawn in their game." Chloe's world tilted again. She felt as if the ground had been ripped out from under her. The Westbrook family? A pawn? "Stop lying," Nathaniel said, his voice a sharp edge. "You're full of it." "Am I?" Ethan said, unfazed. "You think I'm lying? You've been living in a bubble, Nathaniel. Your father's empire, your family's empire, is built on manipulating people, on controlling outcomes. This pregnancy, the twins, This was all part of a much bigger play. He leaned forward slightly, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. You're not just dealing with your family anymore. This whole thing, it's about something more than you can even comprehend. Chloe felt a cold chill sweep over her. Something more? Her head swam with the magnitude of what Ethan was implying. What kind of empire was Nathaniel really a part of? What kind of dark secret had been kept from her? Nathaniel's face was pale, his lips pressed together in a thin line as if he were trying to suppress something. The words hung in the air like a weight. He didn't look at Chloe, didn't seem to know how to respond. His eyes were locked on Ethan, but Chloe could see the fear, the doubt creeping into his expression. He was losing control. And she was right there, caught in the middle of it all. Ethan's lips curled into a smile, enjoying the chaos he'd stirred. I suggest you both start thinking about the consequences. You can try to walk away from this, but it's already too late. You've already been marked, Chloe. And Nathaniel? He's been marked for years. The coldness of his words settled over them, suffocating everything in its path. Chloe's hands were trembling as she turned to Nathaniel, her heart racing. This wasn't just about a pregnancy. This was about a tangled web of lies, deceit, and manipulation that went deeper than she could have imagined. Nathaniel finally spoke, his voice low, raw. I'm sorry, Chloe. I should have told you everything. I never wanted you involved in this, but you're right. It's too late for that now. We're already in too deep. Chloe took a step back, her mind a whirlwind of confusion and fear. She wanted to scream, to demand answers, but all she could do was stand there, feeling the weight of the lies, the betrayals, and the uncertainty crushing her from every direction. Ethan's smile widened as he stood up, ready to leave. I'll leave you two to think about that, he said, his voice oozing with mock sympathy. But know this, if you don't play your part, there will be consequences. For both of you. As he walked away, Chloe turned to Nathaniel, her heart in her throat. What does he mean? What have we gotten ourselves into? Nathaniel didn't answer right away. He just stared at the door, his mind racing as fast as hers. And in that moment, Chloe realized they weren't just fighting for their future anymore. They were fighting for their very survival. The air outside was thick with tension as Nathaniel and Chloe stood in the shadow of the cafe, the distant hum of city traffic barely reaching them over the pounding of their hearts. Ethan's cryptic warning echoed in Chloe's mind, spinning her thoughts into a whirlwind of confusion and fear. She had no idea what kind of world she had stumbled into, but it was clear now that Nathaniel's family, his empire, wasn't just a business venture. It was a web of power, manipulation, and control that stretched far beyond anything she could have imagined. Nathaniel's hand was tight around his phone as he stared at it, his jaw clenched in frustration. Chloe could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his body was coiled like a spring, ready to snap. He hadn't said a word since Ethan left, and Chloe wasn't sure if he had the answers, or if, like her, he was now lost in a world of uncertainty. Finally, he broke the silence, his voice low and strained. I can't let this go, Chloe. I won't. I'll make them pay for what they've done to you. Chloe turned to him, her breath shallow. You're talking about your family like they're some kind of enemy. Are they? Nathaniel didn't meet her eyes. Instead, he looked toward the street, as if trying to find a place to focus, a place to escape the turmoil that was consuming him. They've always been the enemy, Chloe. I just never saw it. I've been blinded by the money, by the power. But now I see it. They don't care about me. They never did. They care about control, about winning. And you're part of their game now. Chloe's chest tightened as she processed his words. Control. Winning. Was that all Nathaniel had ever been to his family? A pawn in their grand scheme? Then what do we do? Chloe asked, her voice trembling. You've said you'll fight for me, but what does that even mean? How do we stop them? Nathaniel's gaze met hers, his eyes fierce with determination. But there was something else there, something darker. We have to confront them, face them head on. We go to my father, his office, and we demand answers. This ends tonight. Chloe's stomach churned at the thought of walking into that office, the heart of the Westbrook Empire, with no idea what to expect. No idea what kind of person Nathaniel's father was, or what he might do if they confronted him. But there was no other choice. They couldn't keep running from the truth. They arrived at Westbrook Tower, the sleek glass and steel building towering over the city like a monolith. Chloe couldn't help but feel small under its shadow, the weight of what they were about to do pressing on her shoulders. Nathaniel led her through the grand lobby, his posture straight and confident. But Chloe could feel the tension rolling off him, the cracks in his armor exposed. She had never seen him like this before, so raw, so vulnerable. It was a side of him she hadn't known existed, and it made her question everything. They were led through the security checkpoints, the guards nodding at Nathaniel with a quiet respect that did little to ease Chloe's nerves. They passed the elevators and walked down a long corridor lined with glass walls. The city skyline stretched out beyond them, but Chloe couldn't focus on the view. She was too focused on the looming confrontation. When they finally reached the door to Nathaniel's father's office, Nathaniel stopped in front of it, his hand resting on the door handle. He turned to Chloe, his eyes softer now, but still filled with determination. "I need you to stay close to me," he said quietly. "Don't let them divide us. I need you to trust me." Chloe nodded, her breath catching in her throat. "I trust you," she whispered, though even as she said it, doubt gnawed at her insides. Could she truly trust him? Or was this all part of some larger scheme? But she had no choice. She had come this far, and there was no turning back now. Nathaniel opened the door, and they walked into the office. The room was everything Chloe had expected and more. Elegant, imposing, and cold. Dark wood paneling lined the walls, and the expansive glass windows framed the city below like a perfect picture. But the power in this room wasn't in the decor. It was in the man sitting behind the massive desk at the far end. Edward Westbrook. Chloe had seen his picture in magazines, read about his success in the business world. But this man? The man sitting before her now? He was nothing like what she had imagined. He exuded an aura of control, his icy blue eyes piercing through them both as he studied them with a look that made her feel like she was standing in front of a predator. Nathaniel's father didn't speak right away. He simply regarded them both with a cool, calculating gaze. His sharp jawline was set, his perfectly groomed silver hair a stark contrast to the intensity of the moment. The silence stretched, thick with tension. Finally, Nathaniel broke it, his voice low but firm. "Father, we need to talk." Edward's lips curled into a smile, though there was no warmth in it. "Talk? Is that what we're doing here? You think you can come into my office and demand a conversation? After everything I've done for you?" Chloe's heart pounded in her chest. She wanted to speak, to ask the questions burning in her mind, but she knew this wasn't the time for her voice to be heard. Nathaniel needed to lead this conversation. "You've done a lot for me, sure," Nathaniel said, his voice tight with frustration. "But what about her? What about Chloe?" Edward raised an eyebrow, clearly amused. "Ah, so this is about her now. You've always been too sentimental, Nathaniel. It's business, not emotions. You do well to remember that." "Business," Nathaniel shot back, his voice rising. "You've used her. You've used both of us." The smile on Edward's face faltered for just a moment before it returned, colder than ever. "Used you?" he repeated, leaning back in his chair. "You think this is about you and her? You're mistaken. This is bigger than both of you." Chloe could feel the air in the room grow even colder as the weight of his words settled in. Nathaniel took a step forward, his jaw clenched. "No, this is about me. And this is about Chloe," Nathaniel said, his voice low but full of conviction. "You've been controlling everything in my life, and now you've dragged her into it." Edward's eyes narrowed, his expression turning deadly serious. "You think you can defy me, Nathaniel? You think you can take control of your life now, after everything I've done for you?" Nathaniel didn't flinch. "I don't need your help anymore. I'm done." The air between them crackled with a dangerous energy, and Chloe could feel the tension rise, threatening to boil over. Edward stood up slowly, his hands resting on the desk. His gaze flickered between Nathaniel and Chloe, his lips curling into a smirk. "We'll see about that," he said coldly. "You think you can just walk away?" "There are consequences, Nathaniel. There are always consequences." Nathaniel's eyes burned with defiance, but Chloe could see the doubt in his expression. Could he really walk away from everything his father had built? Could he fight against the empire that had controlled his life for so long? The moment of truth had arrived. Chloe felt her phone buzz in her pocket, but she didn't reach for it. The door to Edward's office opened with a soft click. And standing there in the doorway was someone Chloe never expected to see. Someone from Nathaniel's past. Someone who would change everything. "Looks like we've got company," Edward said, his smile widening. Chloe's heart skipped a beat as she turned to see who had entered the office. Standing in the doorway was a tall man in his late 30s, dressed in a sharp, dark suit. His features were strong, his jaw set like stone, and his eyes, cold, calculating, locked onto Nathaniel with an intensity that sent a chill through Chloe's spine. She didn't recognize him at first, but the way Nathaniel's posture shifted, the subtle tension in his body, he knew this man. The stranger stepped forward, his gaze moving past Chloe to Nathaniel. There was no greeting, no pleasantries, just a shared, weighty silence between them. As if the air itself knew that something massive was about to unfold. Nathaniel's jaw tightened, his eyes flashing with a mixture of anger and frustration. He straightened up, but there was a hesitation in his movement, as if he were deciding whether to run or face whatever this man represented. "Well, well," the man said, his voice smooth but laced with menace. "Nathaniel, I see you've been busy. Family business, as always." He glanced briefly at Chloe, the cold smile on his lips only deepening as he took her in. "And this must be the woman who's been making all the headlines, The one who managed to pull off the impossible." Nathaniel stood still, his hands balled into fists at his sides. "What are you doing here, Marcus?" His voice was low, almost a growl, but it carried an underlying layer of exhaustion that Chloe could feel vibrating through him. Chloe turned to Nathaniel, confusion mounting in her chest. Marcus? She didn't know who this man was, but it was clear that his presence was not a welcome one. The tension in the room doubled, and the air grew thick with unspoken history. Marcus ignored Nathaniel's question, instead letting his eyes slide back to Chloe. "I'm sure you don't know who I am," he said smoothly, the smirk on his face not reaching his eyes. "But it doesn't matter. I've been keeping an eye on things for a while now. I see you've got yourself tangled up in Nathaniel's little mess." Chloe's mind raced. What mess? What did this man know? How was he connected to Nathaniel? Marcus's gaze flickered back to Nathaniel, his lips curling in a mock expression of sympathy. "I never thought it would go this far, Nathaniel. I honestly thought you'd have the sense to leave well enough alone. But now? Now you've dragged her into it too." He turned back to Chloe, his eyes sharp. "And now, you're both in a situation that's a little bit too deep for you to get out of. Don't say I didn't warn you." Nathaniel's body was rigid, his chest rising and falling with each controlled breath. Chloe could feel the heat radiating off him, the intensity of the moment suffocating. She felt like a mere spectator in a game where she didn't know the rules, surrounded by players who held all the cards. "Enough, Marcus," Nathaniel said, his voice cold. "What do you want?" Marcus's lips twitched upward, but it wasn't a smile. "Want? Oh, Nathaniel, I'm not here for want. I'm here because it's time for you to realize exactly what you're dealing with. You think you can just walk away from this, away from your family's legacy? You can't." Chloe stepped forward, her hands shaking as she tried to process the words. "What are you talking about? What does your family have to do with this? What do you want from us?" Marcus's eyes flickered over to her again, the same coldness settling into his gaze. "You really don't get it, do you?" His voice was laced with amusement, as if her confusion was an amusing puzzle to him. "This whole situation, the pregnancy, Nathaniel's little rebellion, it's all part of the plan. The Westbrook family doesn't do things by accident. Everything is carefully calculated. And now, Chloe, you're right in the middle of it." Chloe recoiled as if he had slapped her. Part of the plan? She had thought it was just a coincidence, that all of this, her pregnancy, the mess with Nathaniel's family, was some twisted accident. But Marcus was telling her something else. This wasn't an accident. Nathaniel's gaze turned sharp, his fists clenching harder. No, this isn't your game anymore, Marcus. You don't control me anymore. If you think for 1 second I'll let you drag her into whatever you've got planned, you're wrong. Marcus laughed, the sound chilling in the silence of the office. Control, Nathaniel? You lost control the moment you took that first step away from the family. You think you can play by your own rules now? Do you really think Chloe will be spared from what's coming next? The Westbrook name? It's everything. And it's going to cost you both, whether you like it or not. Chloe felt her stomach drop as the weight of his words pressed down on her. Cost them both? What kind of cost was he talking about? What kind of game had she been thrust into without even realizing it? Nathaniel's eyes were dark now, and the anger in his expression was undeniable. What do you mean? What are you going to do? Marcus leaned forward, his eyes gleaming with an unsettling satisfaction. You'll find out soon enough. Just know this. Everything you think you can control has already been planned for you. And if you're not careful, you'll lose everything. Your family, your reputation, your future. Chloe took a step back, her heart pounding in her chest. The weight of Marcus's words settled over her like a suffocating fog. She had been swept into a world where nothing was as it seemed. Everything about her life, about her pregnancy, about Nathaniel, was part of a game that she hadn't even realized she was playing. Enough, Marcus! Nathaniel shouted, his voice laced with frustration. I've had enough of your threats. I'm done with all of this. Marcus didn't flinch. He simply shrugged, his smile returning. We'll see about that. You can't escape the game, Nathaniel. You and Chloe are in this together. And there's no going back. With that, Marcus turned and walked toward the door, his footsteps echoing in the silence of the office. Nathaniel stood frozen, staring at his retreating figure, his fists still clenched at his sides. Chloe's breath caught in her throat as she realized just how deep they were in this. She had thought they could escape, that they could face the future together. But now, it seemed like the past had already caught up with them, and there was no way out. The door clicked shut behind Marcus, but the silence that followed felt more like a weight than a relief. Chloe turned to Nathaniel, her heart racing, and before she could say anything, Nathaniel's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, his expression immediately darkening. Chloe, I don't know how much more of this I can take, he muttered, his voice barely a whisper. But we need to act now. Chloe's heart sank. Act? Before she could ask him what he meant, his phone buzzed again, the screen lighting up with an unknown number. Nathaniel didn't hesitate this time. He picked up the phone, his finger hovering over the screen, a sudden look of dread crossing his face. And then, the message flashed on the screen. Your time is running out. This is just the beginning. The air in the office was heavy with the weight of unanswered questions and unspoken truths. The message on Nathaniel's phone lingered in the silence like a ticking clock. Your time is running out. This is just the beginning. Each word felt like a death sentence, and Chloe could see the fear creeping into Nathaniel's eyes. He wasn't the same man who had walked into this room hours ago. This version of Nathaniel was fractured, desperate, and exhausted by a fight he didn't know how to win. Chloe felt a cold chill sweep over her as she took in the words, her own heart hammering in her chest. This is just the beginning. What had they gotten themselves into? What had Nathaniel's family been pulling behind the scenes all this time? Nathaniel turned to her, his expression a mixture of determination and regret. I didn't want this for you. I didn't want to drag you into this mess. Chloe reached for his hand, squeezing it tightly. You didn't drag me into anything, Nathaniel. I'm here because I want to be here. We're in this together, whether we like it or not. The room was still, but there was a sense of finality in her words. They couldn't undo what had already happened, couldn't change the path that had brought them here, but they could choose how they moved forward. Nathaniel stared at her for a long moment, his face softening. Then, he nodded slowly, as if a weight had been lifted from his shoulders. You're right. We can't go back, but we can fight, and we will. I'll fight for you, Chloe. For our future. Chloe smiled, though it felt more like a release than a victory. We'll fight. But we need to act fast. We need to go after them. We need to find out everything about my pregnancy, about what they've been doing, and about how to stop them. Nathaniel's eyes hardened, a newfound resolve taking hold. I'll take care of the business side. I'll use everything I have to take down my family. I won't let them control me anymore. But you need to be safe. You and the twins. Chloe nodded, feeling the weight of his words, but also the truth in them. She had been living in a state of uncertainty, terrified of what might happen next. But Nathaniel was right. They couldn't wait any longer. They had to confront what was coming. They spent the next few days putting their plan into motion. Nathaniel used his connections to gather information on his family's dealings, pulling strings where he could. Chloe, meanwhile, sought out the best doctors and geneticists she could find, determined to uncover the truth about her pregnancy and what it meant for her future and the twins growing inside her. The pressure was immense, but with every step they took, the pieces started falling into place. They learned that Nathaniel's family had been involved in illegal business practices, shady mergers, backroom deals, and power plays that spanned decades. The Westbrook name, built on a foundation of wealth and corruption, was teetering on the edge of collapse. And through it all, Chloe and Nathaniel found themselves growing closer. The bond between them, forged in the heat of their crisis, became stronger with every shared moment. They began to see each other not just as two people caught in a whirlwind of lies, but as partners, united against the forces that sought to tear them apart. Nathaniel's father, Edward Westbrook, made a few half-hearted attempts to stop them, sending lawyers and private investigators to intimidate them. But it was too late. Nathaniel had made his decision, and there was no turning back. The final confrontation came sooner than they expected. It was late one evening when Nathaniel and Chloe walked into Edward Westbrook's office once again, this time with irrefutable evidence of the corruption that had run through the family for generations. The truth was out. The Westbrook empire was about to crumble, and there was nothing Edward could do to stop it. "You've done this to yourself, father," Nathaniel said, his voice cold but resolute as he stood in front of his father's desk. Edward was seated behind it, his expression a mixture of anger and disbelief. "I built this empire, Nathaniel," Edward spat, his eyes dark with fury. "And I'll burn it to the ground before I let you take it from me." Nathaniel stepped forward, unflinching. "You've already burned it down, father. All of it. The lies, the manipulation, the control. It's over." Edward's face twisted in rage as he stood up, but there was no more fight left in him. Chloe watched as Nathaniel faced his father for the last time. The man who had made him into something he hated. And yet, the man who was still his father. "This is the end of the road," Nathaniel said, his voice firm. "I'm not your pawn anymore." Edward took a step back, his shoulders slumping in defeat. "You don't know what you're doing, Nathaniel. You think you can walk away from all of this? The power, the legacy?" "I already walked away," Nathaniel replied, "and I'm not coming back." As they left the office, Chloe felt a sense of weight lift from her shoulders. The fight wasn't over, but they had taken the first step toward breaking free of the Westbrook legacy. There would be legal battles, media scrutiny, and 1,000 more challenges ahead. But for the first time in a long time, Chloe felt like they were in control. They walked out of the building together, the cool night air a welcome change from the suffocating tension that had consumed them for so long. Nathaniel turned to her, his eyes softening. "I meant what I said, Chloe. I'm with you, always." Chloe smiled, the fear and uncertainty that had been swirling inside her finally beginning to settle. "I'm with you too. Whatever comes next, we'll face it together." A year later, Chloe and Nathaniel stood in their new apartment, looking out over the city that had been the backdrop to their tumultuous journey. The twins were now 6 months old, their laughter filling the air as they played in the living room. They had rebuilt their lives from the ground up, forging a new path in a world that no longer held the same power over them. Nathaniel had stepped away from his family's empire for good, choosing instead to focus on rebuilding a life with Chloe and their children. As Chloe watched Nathaniel hold their children in his arms, she couldn't help but feel a sense of peace. They had survived. They had fought back. And most importantly, they had chosen each other, no matter what. Together, they were stronger than the forces that had once sought to tear them apart. And for the first time in a long time, Chloe believed that everything they had fought for was worth it.